Good afternoon, everybody. This is Mary Hager, and my presentation is Fun Activities Using Interactive Devices. I'm so glad that you decided to join me this afternoon. I'm just really happy to share this information with you and hope that you will really like it. I wanted you to know that this is the fourth presentation I've done for webinar for AbleNet, and the other webinars are on their archive site. So if you get a chance, you might want to check them out sometime. That's all for free. I'd also like you to know that there's different products and companies that I'll mention today, but I always put in a disclaimer that I don't work for any of these companies, but just enjoy their different products. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in, and I'll get to them as soon as I can and try and answer them. Also, if you can't hear me, if you could type that in, and I will try and speak up and do better. Okay, so we'll go ahead along here. And all right, so we have fun activities using interactive devices. We did our little bit of introduction. Hi. We're going to be talking today about interactive devices with batteries, interactive devices with power cords, remote communication between devices, and self-modified battery-powered commercial devices. And then at the end, I'll leave some time for question answers in case that there's something that you think of as we go along. So the purpose of interactive devices, since I worked in a school system for many, many years, my brain automatically goes to how to include students with special needs in the classroom. Now that I'm a volunteer and I work with adults in a day setting, I'm still thinking about how to include the students with various abilities. Another thing is improved motor function. And so you'll probably hear me say this on and off. As you think about the different devices, think about how you'll be able to use them and how you could improve function. Another is cause and effect. And one thing that I've always loved about working with students in any kind of setting is working with different disabilities, and you'll see that idea of cause and effect come through, hopefully, in these interactive things. I love that technology like this can be adapted for any grade or any age. I love the fact that students can work together, and the collaboration with occupational therapy, speech therapy, and classroom teachers, and of course, they're fun. So I like to think of this first slide as giving me a reminder how this webinar came to be, and it was a flashlight activity. The flashlights are not necessarily interactive, but I was talking with the science teacher at this facility that I volunteer at, and he's always looking for ways to make science fun and exciting for any type of ability that the students have. And one of the ideas he talked about was a flashlight, because he was real interested in students knowing how a flashlight works. And it might seem simple, but there's a lot of concepts that go on with the flashlight. And I really like the idea of being able to have a real practical use too, because of course, for us and anybody, it's good to have a working flashlight. So this flashlight we found on the internet is really nice. It has a battery that easily goes into the compartment, and the switch to turn it on and off is really easy. So not only is it practical, you're bringing in motor skills, and then you're also bringing in language concepts besides. And this is just another idea to show you how it's packaged, how it's ready to go. So from this idea of, well, batteries are a pretty neat thing to talk about from a science standpoint, It's a really great thing to talk about from a functional standpoint from occupational therapy. I wonder how we could possibly make this idea of power and electricity and that kind of thing more fun, more interactive. So the first slide here is of Charlie Brown. This is an interactive device that Hallmark put out last year. And with this, I think if you look closely there on the slide, you'll get to see the little button that you have to push. And these little characters, I just fell in love with them because not only are they fun, they're interactive, but everybody knows about Snoopy and Charlie Brown. So here's the Snoopy. And all of these, when you activate the button, when you push the button by battery, they go ahead and have music, and these have motion. Here's the Lucy. And so she dances, and there's music connected with this. And I think one thing, too, that I liked about this is that the students, right away when I brought them into the classroom, just fell in love with them. So these particular devices can be activated, can, play on their own. But the neat thing about them is that they can also be hooked together. And this particular young man who saw these, as we were talking about, okay, they've got the batteries, neat things can happen with these, and they hook together, he immediately wanted to hook them together to see what the two could do joined. So once you hook them together and you press one of the buttons, they both start playing music and they both start moving. So with this particular group of characters, you can see Linus and Pigpen and Charlie Brown and Lucy and Snoopy. They all can be hooked together. And you can imagine the fun that this student and the other students had with putting them together in one way and then unhooking them and putting them together in another way, and, of course, the interaction part. And then the science part of, again, with batteries. Okay, how are these things going to work? Well, you have to have a battery. So that kind of keyed right into the flashlight where they already had learned something about batteries. This next character from Peanuts, and again, I don't work for Hallmark. I just love these interactive things that they have, that they come out with something different each year. And at the end, you'll probably hear me talk a little bit more about finding things easily. And I think that's one of the things that drew me to these right away, is because these things, depending on, what year the Hallmark is coming out with, you just have to go down to your local store and find these. So anyway, a couple years ago, they came out with this little Peanuts band also, and they have the small switch, which is very easy to activate. But with these, I think I even like these more because they're remote. And the fun thing about these, when they had them all over the store, when you pressed one, like say you pressed the Linus, someplace in the store, the Snoopy would start going. And then if the Snoopy would start going someplace else in the store, you might have Charlie Brown going. And so it was just really fun to think about the possibilities of having something remote. So again, we still have batteries, but they can work remotely. And judging from where these little guys were placed in the store that year, easily, 6 feet, 10 feet of activation. So again, like, how could I use this in my classroom? How could I use this in my facility? Well, they can be a distance apart. They don't have to be exactly on top of each other. Okay. I'll try and get to that question in just, I see someone has raised their hand. I'll try and get to that in just a little bit. Okay, so here we have 4 of the remote pieces together, and we have, as you can see, Snoopy and Linus and Woodstock and on Charlie Brown, and I put them together close here just, for purposes of the picture. But again, you could have them in any place in the classroom, and they're still going to interact with each other. They're still going to be remote. They're still going to be able to have lights go up and sound go on. And again, thinking about speech therapy, who was the speech therapist who was so excited about these, she just loved the fact that she could talk about, well, the songs, definitely, but also about words of on and off, how close together. And the science teacher loved the part about, well, look, these will still interact with each other 4 feet away or 6 feet away. So that was really fun. The next group of interactive devices I'd like to talk about, and they're really fun, but with these, now these are not batteries, so this gave the science teacher a chance to talk about, okay, these don't have batteries, but they have power cords. And so you see you've got one that's a power cord and a magic cord, and the different devices may have to have different type of little power cords to make them work. But again, this was really neat because it broadened up the concept about, well, what do you need power cords for? And some people might say, well, these things are just too high level for our students, but just think about how excited you might be playing with these things at the store. Well, they were excited about it. They might not have understood all of the concepts behind it, but it was really fun and engaging. I think that's a word probably that I need to use more, engaging. So in this one, hopefully you can see the little penguins that are there. There's one that plays a little saxophone. There's one that plays a piano. And these go ahead and can interact with each other. And, of course, you see the one fella, he had to pick the penguin up right away. And his friend next to him didn't want to let that go by, so she picked up a little penguin also. And that gave the science teacher a chance to say, okay, let's go ahead and see how these are going to act. And they press the buttons, but nothing would happen because they have to have a power cord. Okay, so in this picture here, hopefully you can see the little guy, the little penguin with the saxophone, the one with the piano, the one with the guitar, and they all light up and they all make sounds. So they're all interacting. They can all interact with each other. And this is a description of working together, but then also I wanted you to get a good chance to see the chords behind there. And so the cord has little like prongs on it, and you put those, one goes into each device, but you could have just one by itself, but you have to put, each one into each little penguin. So then hopefully you can kind of get an idea how cute it was with them all lit up and them all interacting together. And you can imagine the oohs and the ahs when all of this was going on. Okay. Again, the penguins do have small switches, but they're easy to activate. And again, placement might be, an interesting thing. So if you have a student that doesn't have as good of a reach, you can still place one of them closer to that student. Or say you have a student that you want to reach farther, you could place that far away, but they will all end up interacting with each other. So we talked about that the penguins can work alone. So you don't have to have all of them together, but it was fun to be able to have one of the students plug one of the little prongs into, say, the fellow with the saxophone. Okay, he was able to go on. Then, had another student press the little guy with the guitar, and he went on. Put the prong into the little guy with the piano, and he went on. There's another group of interactive devices that I really wanted to have you, have a chance to talk to you about. And these are the Frosty Friends. These little guys are kind of amazing, and they're just so cute. They came out in different years, and as they came out with different critters that turn on, they also do different kinds of things. So in this first one that I have, and of course he needs his power cord, and I'll just go ahead and let you know here that it was really neat for the students to think about, oh, that's a whole different source. That's a whole different thing we have to think about. An outlet. We got to think about what are we going to plug this into. And, of course, I love things that students are already a little bit familiar with. So, like in this case, that wall outlet, where is that? And then the science teacher was able to say, okay, well, if you want to plug a light in at your house, where's that plug? And so I just love the fact that it was able to be related back to home. In this one, you see that there's two Frosty Friends interacting with each other. And so you can press that little button, and there's one in the back there, and he's on a little log. And his log rolls around, and the lights go on, and there's music. The little guy closest to you is on a teeter-totter. So he's going to go up and down, have music, and his lights go on. And so the two can interact together. The next one is three interacting together. And the one on the far right, this one I kind of tried to hide the cords a little bit so that you could get to see the devices better. But the one on the far right is like a big igloo, a big dome. And when you press that will go ahead and turn on lights and music. But then the light of the one next to him goes on, and the one next to him goes on. And when we were doing this in the classroom, the students were already saying, put on another one, put on another one. And I think it really thrilled the speech therapist, too, to hear all of that interaction and that the students were using words in such a meaningful way. In fact, one student that has a number of disabilities was able to say so clearly that day, on, turn it on. And that was just really amazing to hear. So you can do 4 together, and now there's 5 together. So here we have one where it has only music and lights. Then we have the little guy on the swing who's going to have music and lights and swinging. The one toward the back there, music, lights, and that little roller going. And then the one over here that we talked about in the front with the teeter-totter. So music and lights and the teeter-totter going back and forth and back and forth. In this one, I really just wanted to show the chords as clearly as I can, the particular chords that you need for this, and then, of course, that you're going to have to be able to, or the main one will have to plug into a power source. And at this point, I think it was kind of fun to talk about because we had a storm not real long before this, and a lot of the students' power went out. And, a couple of them said, well, what happens if the power goes out? We wouldn't be able to play with these. And the science teacher was able to say, that's correct, because you have to have a power source. And so it was just really neat through some of this to be able to have like this aha moment where students were really getting into it and thinking about, oh, yeah, power and things like that happen at our house. So in this one, I just wanted you to see how cute they looked with all of the lights at one time. And Frosty Friends with lights and sounds. And I keep I know I keep emphasizing that, but it was just so fun. And I think if you ever get a chance to play with any of these things or have your students play with any of these things at the homework store, like this year they have something completely different. They're Mickey Mouse and Friends at like little carol, like if you would carol, but they don't mind at all that you play with these things at the store as they, as they get them in through their promotion through the season. The part that I think I'd like to spend a couple minutes on here is in the classroom. So being always a believer of classroom activities and trying to interact with speech therapy and also interacting with any clinicians around, I liked bringing them into the classroom so that the students could have a chance to choose what they might like to hook up, and also that was one of the requirements for the lesson that day, that they were going to have to figure out how do we get these things to work? How are we going to hook them up? And you might say, well, I have a student that wouldn't be able to put that little prong into that device, but that's okay because the friend next to them, which would be wonderful working together, would be able to do that. Taking turns. I don't know how taking turns are with the clients or the students that you work with, but it's amazing how that's something that needs to be worked on forever. And it was really wonderful for the classroom teacher, the science teacher, to be able to say, all right, we know that these are fun. We know that you want to get everything going, but you got to take turns. And this is just a forever concept, but it certainly does pay off even in adult life with the students. Okay, so here we have one of the students, and it's her turn. She's trying to figure out how to turn it on, and she has to be able to find that small button. So she does have the motor power to press down on that small button because it really doesn't take much activation. Everyone involved. So we talked about how bringing all of these things into the classroom was so much fun, had to take turns, how to be engaged, and I loved this idea of so many people. Oh, there's a question from Jean, and she said, how do you like working with groups? And Jean, thank you for that question because I just have always loved working with groups. And I think that's one reason that I really love this facility that I'm volunteering in because it is a group setting. And there's certainly wonderful things that we can all work on one-on-one, but to see the students interacting with each other and for them to figure out things that I might not even figure out, and they're able to figure out combinations and things like that. So thank you very much. Yes, I love working in groups, and I'm glad I'm still able to do that in this facility. So we talked about devices plug into the magic cord, which plugs into the wall outlet. And let me tell you, it was really fun. It was like a little scavenger hunt almost because, it just seems like there's a lot of things you just don't pay attention to. They work and they run, and that's about all there's to it. And I think that's why the science teacher really liked the little scavenger hunt of, okay, where's the wall plugs in this room? If we want this thing to work, we're going to have to be able to find a wall plug. And then, oh, okay, so this power cord isn't quite long enough that we have here to reach all the way to that plug. What are we going to have to do to connect something to that plug? And again, talking about aha moments, one of the students actually, said, I didn't realize that it needed to have something to plug into something for something else to happen. And that was worth $1 million just in itself. All right, now I'd like to take a little time to talk about remote with interactive devices. With remote devices, and people always kind of make fun of me for this one, but that's just fine. You need to have a transmitter and a receiver. They must be compatible. And I'm going to go ahead and let you know when I first became interested in remote things. I thought I could go to a garage sale and buy a remote at one place and like a remote toy, and a transmitter at a different place, and they would work. Well, they don't. So that's just really something kind of neat to keep in mind. And when I tell students, like my little stories of, oh my gosh, I should have known something, it's kind of neat to hear them say, well, Miss Mary, how come you didn't know that? Or, I would have known that. Well, anyway, I didn't, but I think it's kind of a neat story to know that we have to be able to make a little fun of ourselves, too. And with remote devices, we talked about that. The ones we had earlier that we showed were about 6 feet distance. Well, sometimes they can be up to 30 feet. Oh, I've got a question here from Janet. Those Hallmark toys are so neat. How can I buy them now that they're not in stores anymore? Thank you for that question. I really appreciate it. Well, one way, of course, is always eBay. eBay, I guess, would have anything. But if you decide and say, well, I'd kind of like to get this year's model at the Hallmark store, I'm going to just give you a tip. Wait till they go on sale, because they do go on sale the day after Christmas. And like me, I would wait for that. But yes, you can. I guess on eBay you can always find anything. So, but thank you for that question. So with remote devices, a big advantage, of course, is no wires. You don't have to worry about a wall outlet. One can just interact or talk to each other. And a disadvantage, of course, like we talked about, is they must communicate reliably in sync, and it requires supply at both ends. You'd have to have power at both ends. And then I'll just mention to you here about this tree luminator, and that was a fun device where you press down on this device, and you can probably see the receiver on the other end. So you plug that into the wall, and then you can plug a Christmas tree or anything into it. So then you take away your little transmitter, put it in some other place of the room, push down on it, and in this case, when we were first playing with these things, it turned on a Christmas tree. And, of course, the students wanted to know, would this tree illuminator work with our Frosty friend? And he sure did. And then you can see how easy it is in this case to push down on this lever. Okay, and again from AbleNet, probably everybody knows that if you want remote things like your transmitter and receiver, they certainly have those available. I always like to talk about Daisy Duck. She was my first experience in being able to put a little interrupter by the battery there so that I was able to turn this little Daisy Duck into a switch toy. And then as I got more interested in remote things, I was able to turn it not to just like a jelly bean switch pressing down. I was able with the jelly beamer and receiver to turn Daisy into a remote toy. And I just love playing with things and making things useful in all kinds of different settings. And here's one of the battery adapters. I know many of you out there are very adept at making these adapters. For me, I always had to kind of consider, was the money that I spent, I think at like $15, just better to go ahead and get something that was going to work right away, or, taking the time to actually make my own. So in summary then, I'd like to just review things to consider when choosing interactive devices. Cost, of course, but we always have garage sales and day after Christmas sales. Durability, ease of control, size of buttons, and power source. Oh, I have a question here from Eva. How does the Jelly Bean remote device work? Okay, so in that case, you would have your transmitter, Okay, so you would press down on the transmitter, that would send a signal to the receiver. So, for instance, in the picture they showed of Daisy Duck, where she had the battery power interrupter in there, and there was a plug on the end. Okay, so then the beamer receiver, that plug would fit into the plug that you've already hooked into the Daisy Duck. So you'd already have your transmitter beamer and your transmitter receiver. So that's how that would work. Thank you, Eva, for that question. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I'm just looking here at our time. I believe that our time is done, but I'll wait here a minute in case there might be another question. And again, thank you all so much for being part of my webinar today, and I just really have enjoyed putting this together for you, and I hope that you have been able to get something out of it, and also how you can think about, okay, I have this thing I want to use, but how can I use it in different ways, and how can I use it with different students or different clients, and how easily can I get it? That's always a big thing. All right, well, thank you, everybody, for being part of the seminar, and have fun, and I hope you try out some of the devices. Goodbye.